When looking at the pieces of the Sonic franchise that contributed to its rise to stardom, one cannot neglect the trio of 2D platformers that is Sonic 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles. These titles followed a framework of momentum-based gameplay that the player had to work to maintain by avoiding hazards and maneuvering around obstacles that would otherwise kill all of the speed you've built up. The pinball physics would add a layer of motion that, if you spin dashed and jumped off a slanted piece of terrain or a wall, insane shortcuts could be pulled off in less time than it'd take to progress through a given stage in conventional fashion. The best levels of this trilogy were crafted with wide layouts that promote speed buildup, as well as branching pathways that either provide the player with an easier route as a reward for their skill, or a torturous path filled with enemies and traps designed to slow you down. The taxonomy of these level layouts are what push people to replay these games, with their motivation rooted in discovering quicker routes to the finish or messing around trying to find tricks to bump down their times. What we're going to talk about today is the lower end of the level design spectrum, the side of the scale populated with zones that I either liked yet found lacking compared to the other ones, or zones that I wouldn't be caught dead revisiting on any playthrough. In case you're wondering, I didn't want to include Sonic CD zones because that game is so fundamentally different that might deserve its own video. Without further ado, let's get into my top 10 worst Sonic zones from Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. Right from the start, one glance at the pitch black backdrops and the amount of vines in a setting that seems vacant otherwise gives off an unsettling vibe. The music gives off an ominous tone as if something is creeping up on you, and as you turn around to confront your fear, it ends up that there was nothing there all along, just your suspicion getting the best of you. The atmospheric appeal of the zone tells you everything you need to know about it. It's not trustworthy. Ranging from spikes emerging from walls that would have been near impossible to see coming on an initial playthrough, to vine appendages that'll smash you into the ground if you're not careful about controlling your momentum, and even an area where you've no choice but to process your failure and wait around to die if you blaze past the switch to power the bridge. Mystic Cave likes to play tricks on you. The dubious atmosphere is an aspect of this zone that I cherish it for, and I do think that it conceptually blends well with the level design, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't get annoyed with hazard placement I could not see coming from time to time. Next up on our list, we've got the zone that serves as the concluding act of Sonic 3, Launch Base. It's essentially Eggman's site of operations where his industrialism of the world is at its highest. The transition from the ice cap zone gives us a glimpse of the gap between a natural location with glaciers and snow to an area that's basically a playground for now mechanized animals and contraptions. Given Launch Base's, well, Eggman's base of operations, you can expect hard evidence of his attempts to incinerate you plastered everywhere. The enemy placement isn't incredibly offensive like another one of that 300 IQ dickhead's evil layers, but it can get frustrating at times, like badniks that linger at opposing sides of these rotating props and bird statues acting as flamethrowers. These two acts are maze-like with many layers of verticality, making it easy to get lost if you get hit by something and fall too far down. This is the one zone I dread revisiting when playing Sonic 3, mainly because of how awful the visuals are and the annoying music that bothers me. Although I wouldn't say it's completely badly designed from a mechanical standpoint, because there are many areas dedicated to momentum buildup, except contrary to Green Hill Zone where speed is easy to come by. Launch Base demands you work for it by overcoming the defense mechanisms placed in store for you. Sliding in at number 8 is Spring Yard, the third available zone to dash through in Sonic 1. Visually speaking, it's got a nice cityscape backdrop among lavender skies. The music imparts a sense of helplessness that stems from Eggman roboticizing life on South Island, which merges well with the darker tone that Spring Yard takes up. Towards the ending of Spring Yard's theme though, there's a shimmer of hope, which is obviously Sonic coming in to save the day. I can go on for days and nights about the conceptual appeal and fantastic art direction of the zone, but what bugs me again is the general hazard placement. There are spike balls and cramped corridors that maneuver back and forth at the slowest rate possible, and slowly rising platforms that you need to wait for to make progress. Generally speaking, the zone is built around standing in place for a majority of the time, and it can come off as boring. Considering that Spring Yard is directly after the next zone in this list, it's no surprise that despite me still loving this game, Sonic 1 can be a chore to replay from time to time. Imagine you're a teenager living in the 90s, a crazy platformer fan at that. Within your childhood, you've dug into 80s delights like Mario Bros, Mega Man, Mappy, and many more, but come 1991, a subversion of what you've come to expect from the genre graces the market: Sonic the Hedgehog. An adventure defined by momentum-based gameplay and pinball physics. You make the purchase and boot it up on your Sega Genesis. Green Hill Zone is the first attraction, starring open level design with slopes and other pieces of terrain designed to shoot you across the stage should you approach them with the right amount of speed. It's a cathartic experience, and to think that there are even more levels in store. You finish Green Hill Zone, naturally expecting the rest of the game to follow that same philosophy, and then next you get Marble Zone, a series of dungeons that will test your patience. The problem with this zone is that it abandons the idea of quick momentum established in Green Hill, substituting it for light puzzle solving, mandatory waiting, and insta-kills everywhere that encourage passive play while subsequently rendering rings useless as a fail-safe mechanism. The craftsmanship behind Marble Hill is a stark contrast to how free-flow Green Hill was, as it lends itself to forced, slower-paced progression. Although I don't like Marble Zone's sluggishness that extends over 3 acts of pain and suffering, I can appreciate the abandoned ruins aesthetic of purple interiors as well as the hopeless tone that the music takes on, a divergence from the happiness that Green Hill's theme gave off. Coming in at number 6, we've arrived at yet another one of Eggman's influences on the world. Although the design is heavily industrial, which should be saddening given there should have been signs of organic life prior to Eggman being a prick, the music is somewhat uplifting and mechanical sounding, like the idea of exploring a giant corkscrew facility is so compelling in spite of how it was built in the first place. However, that's all the positive commentary I can give on Metropolis because it's not really fun at all. You'll find that the platforming in these acts are broken up by a variety of contraptions such as rotating conveyor belts, bumpers, spears jutting out of blocks, and bridges that emerge following a press of a button. What's most offensive though is the enemy design and how they interact with the environment. I'm not gonna mince words, it's excessive. Many times will the game coax you into holding forward only for a boomerang throwing mantis or the disjointed arm of a crab to punish you for doing so. Usually I'm used to the tricks 2D Sonic games like to play on me, you know, the confined screen space which inhibits your ability to see what's around you, specifically hazards and enemies. To compensate for that though, you have a spin dash enveloped by a hitbox that can shred through the bodies of enemies. However, these badniks throw projectiles that render the spin dash obsolete in a lot of situations. Annoyances in this zone can come in the form of placing these threats straight after tight jumps or vertical bends that have me saying out loud, how was I supposed to see that coming? Additionally, there are corkscrews that require running or spin dashing in place to ascend, and not only is that boring in itself, but the exploding starfish enemies discharge spikes that cover tons of directions. Should you get hit, you'll fall off the screw, and since it doesn't come back down by itself, you'll have to leave the vicinity of the screw and walk back for it to respawn back at the bottom. Did I mention that these levels are composed of wide layouts that go on for way too long, in conjunction with this being the only zone in Sonic 2 with 3 acts for some reason? It's blatantly obvious at this point that the developers only cared about seeing you suffer. The green aesthetic coupled with the machinery and energetic music create an interesting atmosphere for a zone. When it comes to the enemy placement, design choices, and the fact that the zone overstays its welcome, it shouldn't be hard to understand why I'm ambivalent about Metropolis as a whole. Diving deep into what I love about the best levels in 2D Sonic games, I've realized that one thing stands out above all else. The fact that I have control over my speed, with that concept presiding over each of my runs. If it takes you 9 minutes to complete an act, chances are it's completely your fault. This could be rooted in confusion during navigation, or perhaps you went to snag a glass of orange juice unknowing of the fact that you left the game on. When you finish an act in a minute or less, however, you can pat yourself on the back knowing you're godlike. Maybe platforming comes naturally to you, or in other cases, replaying the game plenty of times has resulted in muscle memory ingrained so deep within your neurons that you don't even have to think about how to proceed like it's merely second nature. The point is that you as the player have the ability to grow and adapt to the challenges presented to you. But what does Sky Chase do? It defecates all over the entire notion. The worst part about this zone is that you as the player can't even evolve and drop your times because it's a 2-minute auto-scroller. Yes, the game crafted from the concept of intrinsic player improvement, rooted in muscle memory and documenting the layouts of stages, dictates the pace of the level for you, which is a major issue. It's monotonous to push through, plus the completion time can't be manipulated by player skill. Other than the relaxing music that captures the vibe of flying through the clouds, the fact that Sky Chase only has 1 act is the saving grace behind it being number 5, because it doesn't persist long enough to be any more offensive like the next zones in this video. Congratulations to Sandopolis for being the only zone I dislike in the And Knuckles pack. If I were to summarize what I was thinking while playing through it, it'd be Marble Zone. Structurally speaking, they're very similar in the sense that movable blocks are present within the 2 zones and a lot of the gimmicks are compounded on you at once that kills the pacing. Whereas Act 1 is annoying but tolerable, Act 2 is hell incarnate for multiple reasons. Throughout the level are pullable levers that illuminate the pyramid. After a set amount of time, the lights will dim, and when this happens, ghostly enemies spawn and attack you. As you progress, you'll have to keep track of this and activate the pulleys placed throughout the level to keep them away. Not only this, but there are switches you have to move and place for a nearby room to open. Once you stop pushing them, the door will progressively close and you'll have to run before it shuts down, or you'll have to push the switch again. All of this while making sure you're taking note of how lit the room is and pulling the switch when it gets too dark. Combine this with annoying quicksand and an automated section where waiting for quicksand is required to ascend, with said quicksand insta-killing you if you make a wrong move, and you've got the tedium that is Sandopolis. It dumps a ton of frustrating level gimmicks on you at once, and the sudden realization of the backtracking required after making one wrong move. The amount of vexation while trekking through Sandopolis' Act 2 is far too great to ignore. If it wasn't obvious enough that the egg-shaped mustache man wants you buried 6 feet under, this is the physical manifestation of his hatred that'll quell any doubts you might have had. The utter fool that is myself got too complacent with the lighthearted atmosphere of Starlight Zone, completely unprepared for the drastic tonal shift that was Scrap Brain. I understand that a multitude of traps is befitting of Eggman's lair, but holy hell is it bloated with hazards. The opening act eases you into the setting, and by eases you into it I mean that the smell of death permeates the air at all angles. If there was a buffet of ways in which you could potentially lose a life in Scrap Brain, you'd have enough variation on the menu to make for a fresh experience every time you revisit the restaurant. Flamethrowers within the floor, electricity emitting machines, pitfalls, badniks, conveyor belts rotating into descending souls, exploding robots, contraptions that drop you into hazards, crushers, swaying spike balls. It's bloated to hell and back with obstacles. Like, as much as I complain about a launch base, even that pales in comparison to the amount of pain derived from the zone. Playing Scrap Brain without a ring is by far the easiest way to self-induce a scene of anxiety. I can give it points for the difficulty being thematically sound given this is Eggman's direct facility in Sonic 1, but oh my god is this zone not fun to play. And I didn't even get to Act 3, which adheres to a similar prospect of agony, except now you're underwater. If you've played Sonic 1, you're already equipped with a solid understanding of why anything water related in this game is abusive to the player. If you're unaware of what I'm talking about, don't worry, you'll know by the end of this video. Carrying on the theme of exploration within the skies brought about by Sky Chase's Wing Fortress Zone, an airship of immense structural depth and perils that surface every few steps. Before I initiate my attack on this stage, let's get the positives out of the way first. Alright, now that we're done with that, on to the negatives. Part of what I hate about this zone is that, well, it takes place in the air, which means universal pitfalls. Just in case you weren't well acquainted with the game over screen, there are boosters that shoot you across the ship at blinding speeds, way faster than what you could reasonably react to without being aware of what they were capable of prior to stepping on them. Similar to Launch Base, Wing Fortress is oppressive to the eyes, except in a different way. See, Launch Base was painted with contrasting colors that didn't fuse well, but at least it didn't screw with your ability to platform. Wing Fortress's visuals make it difficult to discern whether something is safe or not to interact with, like the fire from the airship's booster engines. You'd expect it to damage you since every other interaction with flames has been unfavorable, but nope, they're actually a facet of the background. Frustration is also easily built up when there are so many platforms in Wing Fortress that alternate between being tangible or not amongst visuals that do not resonate with me whatsoever. With the pressure of falling to my death or having to climb back up the airship after a mistake, the zone evolves into one of tedium. Wing Fortress is a slow, exhausting case of ascending and descending throughout the aerial stronghold, and if that wasn't already a turnoff, wait until you hear the music. Because a compilation of thrown together MIDI farts is just what the player needs to keep them company, right? Despite my hatred for this zone, it's child's play compared to the mark of witchcraft that is number 1 on this list. Be honest with me, is it really a surprise that Labyrinth is the winner of today's battle? To its credit, I'll say that the instrumentals in this zone are indeed soothing, maybe something you could have playing in the background within the midst of a heart-to-heart with someone, or perhaps while you study or prepare for bed, but oh my god, is that where my appreciation for this zone ends. Labyrinth is utter bullshit. It takes everything you might have hated about 2D Sonic, mashes it into a blender, and fucking force feeds it to you. Let's review everything wrong with it, shall we? Okay, first off, 80% of Labyrinth takes place underwater. Is that inherently a bad thing? Sort of. I mean, being submerged means inhibited movement, which is dissonant with what you'd expect from a game where you feel free. But there are routes Sonic Team took with that concept of underwater gameplay to make it fun. Chemical Plant dances with the taxonomy of diverging pathways where the player's better skill would place them at the faster sections at the top, while major mistakes would punish them with the pain of trekking underwater. That's fine, because if you're careful enough you could avoid that agony. In Aquatic Ruin, you're never underwater long enough for it to be a problem. Lastly, Hydrocity's design varies a lot to the point where you're constantly transitioning between land and water with so many opportunities to develop speed through slopes and those hand thingies that shoot you forward. Furthermore, with the implementation of the elemental shields, specifically the bubble shield, you could inadvertently block enemies' attacks without the looming threat of a timer on your ass. Wanna know what Labyrinth does? Mandatory sluggish water sections, ridiculous enemy placement, unfairly designed hazards that are legitimately faster than you in a setting where you have the walk speed of someone with shit in their ass. And every time you make a mistake, every time you make a wrong jump, the idea of drowning sets in and it accentuates the level of anger you feel while playing. How do we get around with having both of our lungs filled with water, you ask? air bubbles. It's nice to know that they're available in a manner that's convenient to you, extremely consistent to the point where you don't have to wait out the entire timer for the bubbles to surface, only for them to not surface. There are 3 acts, I repeat, there are 3 goddamn acts of what is possibly worse than the 8th circle of hell. And just when I thought my days of subjugation were over, Scrapbrain Act 3's aesthetic reminds me of Labyrinth. It seems that no matter how fast I dash into the sunset, no matter how fast I reach for the stars, I'll never be able to outrun the pain. How the fuck did they think Labyrinth was a sound design choice? It integrates forced sluggishness, areas bloated with cheap enemies and obstacles, and the pressure of being on a timer within that state of compromised movement, extending that philosophy of sadism across 3 levels. I'm usually open to changing my opinions and perhaps considering opposing sides when it comes to video games. I really am, but there is absolutely zero fucking way that anyone can convince me that there is a stage worse than Labyrinth. I was gonna close off this video with the obligatory concluding thoughts, but Labyrinth got me so heated that I can't even muster up the courage to do so. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll probably be doing a top 10 best of Sonic 1 through 3 zones in the future, regardless of whether reception for this video is positive or negative. But anyway, thanks for watching and have a good day. Except for the designers behind Labyrinth Zone, because you deserve nothing but mosquito bites for the shit you put your players through.